Hey everyone, and welcome to another edition of Board Games Hitting My Table. This is talking about all the games I've played during the second half of May 2022. So we've got quite a few games here to talk about, so let's get started with Niederwallir, which we played a 3-player game of. So this is a pretty simple, almost like a Gateway Plus level bidding and set collection style game. And it might just be the best set collection game out there, as you're acquiring all these different cards, and they all score in slightly different ways, but generally, the more cards you get, the bigger multipliers you get, more and more points coming your way. And the way you acquire these cards is so cool, as you have these discs or these coins, you are blind bidding on this on your player board and revealing them simultaneously with the other players. And of course, whoever bids the most is going to get priority in taking the cards they want. However, you can keep two tokens back, and they will compound together or combine together and give you an even more powerful coin going forward to give you a better shot of getting the cards you actually want. So a really cool, simple mechanism that works well. We played again with the Niederwallir expansion, which gives you a bigger incentive to win the bids, because a lot of the time you would kind of be okay with coming second or third, and this one kind of amplifies the incentive to win the auction, as I said, to get you these especially powerful cards. So generally I've liked this game from the get-go, and I haven't really waned on that. There is one rule in the game that I'm slightly apprehensive on, which can create some runaway leader problems, and that is that halfway through the game, whoever's winning in each of the categories gets a powerful character that can help them for the rest of the game. But if you mess out on those, you can really start falling behind with no method of catching up. But it's a small nitpick there, but generally I think it's a great experience to be played in 45 minutes or so. And again, just always been a good amount of fun when I've managed to get this onto the table. But didn't have a particularly good game of it, or at least personally, but still a fun experience. That is Niederwallir. We also played a 2-player game of Hashi. So I've only briefly talked about this one on the channel so far. Now this is a roll and write style game by Jeffrey Allers, actually, who's made some pretty cool tile placement games. But this one is something completely different when it comes to the roll and write genre, as you have these player boards here with these different islands on them, and all you're going to do each round is you're going to reveal a card, and everyone's going to use the same card to write a number on one of these islands and then draw a certain amount of bridges. However, when you draw a number on the island, that's the kind of limit of the bridges you can make. And once you do that, you're going to circle the bridges or circle that island, but no longer be able to draw any more bridges. It's quite a confusing game, and one that's not so intuitive, but it does at least try to be different, and it does feel different, if anything. Now, I don't dislike the game at all, but I do feel like I'm kind of just winging it and just going through the motions and just hoping for the best. So it's not really a game I've conquered yet, or even slightly, leaned that way. But it is a decent, and I said it is certainly feels different to most of the roll and write games out there. I managed to win this one with just completely riding my luck, and things just worked out the way I wanted. But I would say, if you were intrigued by the roll and write genre, or if you generally like those games, give this one a look, because again, there's nothing else quite like it out there, and hopefully I'll get a chance to review that one shortly. And we also played a 2-player game of Cartographers, so still on the roll and write thing. And we played one of the maps from the collector's edition here. And the map we played was one with lots of separate little islands on them. So I hadn't played that map before. In fact, I don't think I've even slightly began to scratch the surface of all the different maps that come with this collector's edition. Now, I found this game extremely restrictive because, again, you start instantly with limitations. You can't start putting loads of different shapes down. You have to spend coins to venture into new islands. So it adds a new level there. But I must admit, I did find the board a bit too restrictive for me. Not enough options. And I thought that when playing with that particular map pack, you want to quite carefully tailor the objective cards that you play with. Otherwise, they don't work together so well. Like, for example, we had a bunch of cards that just didn't quite merge with with those islands, like having the longest column of trees, where all the islands are small anyway, so there really wasn't that much potential to score many points from that. But I still like the game. There is another issue I have with it, which is I suppose one of the unique things about the game is when these monster cards come out, you can draw on your opponent's sheet. I don't really get much enjoyment out of that, and I prefer to play the game without it. But I do understand why people like that, because it adds a little bit of interaction. But overall, I do still like the game, but I don't know, maybe slightly waning on it. I'm not sure. I'll have to try some more of the other map packs. But that is Cartographers. We played a 3-player game of Crossed Words, which is a very simple party game, a little word association game where you have this little grid of these clue cards, and you're basically trying to write a clue where these different things collide, or where they cross through each other. However, you can be quite creative with the different clues and things you have, and I must admit, I don't think I've ever had a bad game of crossed words. Every single time I play it, I enjoy it. I want to play it again, and I think it's probably one of the most addictive games that we have in our collection. I could happily play this one for hours because I enjoy it that much. I love the pressure, of being under the time limit and trying to reach out and find a good answer to where some of these cards just don't merge with each other. You have to really think outside the box. And I think we played 2 games of this one, and the second game might have been the hardest or the most difficult array of cards that we've had yet. Some of these words just did not work, but we somehow managed to pull a few clues out of the hat where the other players were satisfied that it was a valid clue. But I don't really care about winning or losing this one. I just enjoy the thought process. And if you want a clever party game, one that plays in 5 minutes, then this is not one to bypass. That is crossed words. Very fun. We're going back a few years now. We played a 3-player game of Can't Stop, and I think this one's probably grown on me actually. A very simple push your luck dice rolling game by Sid Saxon, as you are trying to basically climb these different columns. Each of these columns are associated to a pair of dice, so you've got 2s all the way up to 12s, and all you're going to do is on each of your turn you're going to roll the dice and commit to up to 3 of these different columns. And then each time you roll the dice, or you can choose to roll the dice, you can go up further and further until you don't roll one of those numbers. But you can stop at any time you want. But we discussed after we played this game that I think this one might be one of the push your luck games that I do find it very difficult to stop, which is obviously, of course, what the game is all about. But generally, I know my limits on push your luck games. I kind of stop at a sensible time, but this one really does hook me. And I think we had quite a tight game, a lot of goading each other, trying to encourage each other to push on and go bust. But I still enjoy it. I think it might take a little bit too long for what it is. And I'm somewhat, in my mind, thinking of a way to make this game kind of simultaneous play. I'm sure there'll be a way to do it, but you just need a few more components because there's a little bit too much downtime. But I still like the core experience, and I think the simplicity of the game really works in its favour. So yeah, another good game of Can't Stop. Going into a couple of bigger games now, we played a 3-player game of Fiore, and I introduced this game to 2 players who hadn't played this game before. I think initially they were a bit apprehensive because this is quite a swinger game. You get a lot of points at times when you're placing these different glass tokens down and getting points in a bunch of different ways. You're getting big chunks here and there, getting combos. And within the first third of the game, I think I was really running away with scoring, but I was trying to reassure them, saying like, your points will come and within a matter of time, you'll catch up with me. And that absolutely did happen. It was a very tight scoring game in the end. And I just love the way that the drafting works in this one. You have to be very careful about what you give your opponents. And I think ultimately that's what gave me the win in this game, where a really strong card was handed to me when it probably shouldn't have been, and that was the difference maker. But so many different ways to score in the game. We all went for a very different strategy. I got a big cluster of these chaining points. One of my opponents pretty much monopolised the whole pyramid track here. Got loads of points just compounding on each other. And yeah, just a feast of points in this game. And this is probably maybe one of my front runners of my game of the year so far. I don't think it's going to take that reward, but it's certainly going to be up there. And if I was to classify this as a 2021 game, which I think is listed on Board Game Geek, and I remade my best of 2021 list, this one I think could probably be in the top 5. I think it's that good, and I'm just having a blast with it. So that is Fiore. We also played a 3-player game of Puerto Rico. So it's been a while since I played Puerto Rico, but this is kind of one of those games that you can come back and play, and it really does kind of fit like a glove, this game. It's so easy to understand and to play. However, there's so many nuances in this game, and I just love this layer of player interaction where you've got to be very careful about what you're leaving your opponent, and if taking a certain action is going to benefit them just as much as it's going to benefit you. So I thought it did take a few turns for us to get the kinks out of our system, to get back into the groove of playing. But once we did, it really started to flow nicely. Again, we all went for kind of different strategies. I got a good monopoly on some of the really strong buildings, where I wasn't so worried about what was loaded up on the ships because I had the wharf building, which means I could ship anything as a backup and a contingency. But what a blast this game is. I just think this is a fantastic design that's held up well. This one is this one does have my elite shield, so it is considered one of my favourite games. And it's going to be interesting where this one comes in my top 50, top 100 this year, because I think it's going to hold its own, if anything. But yeah, love this one. I think we all enjoyed it. I did anyway, and it was nice to get some older games back to the table. So that is Puerto Rico. And we also revisited a game that I think we've only played a couple of times. This is Treelings. So this is a pretty unknown little filler game. Pretty much as simple as it gets. A very simple kind of open drafting game where you have a bunch of different cards of different colours, and then you are taking either all the cards of one colour or all the cards with only one type of that card, and then you're building these different columns. And only your tallest columns are going to score, and anything kind of shorter than a neighbouring column is not going to score, and that wraps around to the other players as well. That is pretty much the extent of the game. So it's very simple, and I will say that I was lukewarm at best at this one when I played it first, and I think it might have even dipped from there because the game is so tactical. Like, you cannot do any degree of forward planning because you're always reacting to the cards in the drafting area, and the game can end very abruptly where you had no control over when it's going to end. So again, it's always like this spinning plates and just hoping it ends at a time that's good for you. And that was the kind of lasting impression I had with it. It's not a bad game, and it's a relatively breezy experience, but I felt quite strongly that it was just like, when is the game going to end, and is it going to suit me? Is it going to be a good time or is it not? So that is Treelings. I can't really recommend that one, unfortunately. A game I can recommend, though, is another classic game from my collection. This is Firenze. So for some reason, I just had a complete urge to get Firenze back to the table. I think we played this one yesterday, actually. We played a 3-player game, and this is probably my favourite example of a game that uses that incentive building mechanism. There might be a better name for that mechanism, but I always call it that. Where you have a row of cards here. Some of these cards are fantastic, some of them are pretty nasty, some of them are even punishing. But whenever you take these cards, you have to drop these bricks off on the way, meaning that the cards that are neglected start to build up a huge chunk of these bricks to a point where you can't ignore it. So think of something like No Thanks, where the positive outweighs the negative. And then you're trying to build these columns of these bricks, and then basically commission these different towers to get victory points. So I had an absolutely shocking game. I did terribly, but my opponent did a great job of completing all the balcony tiles, because there are these fixed order of tiles that you can build and get bonus points of doing so. And I think the rest of us kind of neglected that and let that opponent take the win, which is, it's one of these key strategies in the game, and they pulled it off fantastically. And I just love the scarcity of some of these bricks in this game, because if you don't keep adding to your existing tiles or towers, then you have to tear down your tower. So that pressure really ramps up, especially when it comes to the rarer towers here, which only have a few bricks in the first place in the bag. But love this one. And yeah, I really can't recommend this one enough. It's a great Andreas Stedding game that gets kind of forgotten about, probably because of the success of Hansa Teutonica. But this one I think is maybe not quite to the level of Hansa Teutonica, but it's not far off, and I still enjoy it a lot. So that is Firenze. We also played a 3-player game of My Farm Shop. So this one is probably one of the weirdest games that just seems to give or just deliver for me. I've never ever not enjoyed a game at this one. I have no idea why, because technically it's a very simple dice rolling little tableau engine builder. Think of something like Machikoro. In fact, it's got a lot of shared DNA to Space Base and Machikoro. But this one just seems to take it a step beyond. I love the resource management in this game, as you're taking in these different farm resources, and then certain cards will let you trade them in different ways and get money, and money is your victory currency. It just seems to flow wonderfully. Has a little bit of, you've got quite a bit of scope to tailor the board how you want it to be. Are you going to specialise in this type of good? You can even use these mitigation sacks in order to take use cards that you wouldn't normally be able to do. Something like the workers in Castles of Burgundy. And this game I had of My Farm Shop, I was really struggling to get any kind of goods building engine. I struggled to get any resources, and I just got by on the sacks themselves, because I had loads of mitigation tools. I had loads of ways to get sacks, and then I had ways to turn sacks into victory points. So it wasn't quite enough for me to get the win, but it still managed to work despite me not having the traditional resources. But 45-minute game is an absolute joy to play. And for a family weight game, this one might be one of the best out there. And it featured on my top 10 games that should have been mega hits. And I think there's no truer statement than that, forgetting the awful box cover here. But what a great game. That is my farm shop. Just a few more games to go now. We played a 3-player game of Cadia. So this was with another 2 players who hadn't played it before. I think this game is one of the games that you just get straight away. It doesn't take much explaining, and you can just really get your teeth kind of sunk into the actual puzzle itself. Another game where I think we all went for a slightly different strategy. I had the big chain of salmon, someone else special in the bears, and so on. And in fact, this is probably one of my opponents specialised in the terrain building. Normally that's a secondary strategy I go for. I really focus on the animals first. But that terrain really did end up paying dividends, where they got the massive chains and got all these bonus points as well. But lovely game, and just kind of a banker at this point. If I pull this one off the shelf, I know it's going to be 30 to 45 minutes well spent. So covered this one quite a bit on the channel recently, but I'll probably continue to do so. And it's been a regular feature of this segment for probably a few months now. So that is Cadia. And we also played another big game. We played a 2-player game of prager. So this was my number 1 game from 2020, I believe. This is a Vladimir Suki design, and probably one of the most comborific style games out there, as you do something which will trigger something else, which will trigger something else. And something that I took away from this game the first few times I played it was that I could come back to this game in a year's time and just know it without reading many rules. Now, that was semi-true, because I kind of got this one just off the shelf without really preparing for it. And there was a few little niggly rules that I forgot, and especially things during setup. But once I got those out of my system, it does start to flow very well, and it all came back to me, and then we started to enjoy the gameplay experience. Just a wonderful little system here, as you're taking these tiles from this action crane and then taking one of the corresponding actions. However, the spot on the crane also gives you an ability, and you're travelling down this King's Road to the point where you get on this bridge. You're climbing up this castle and this kind of university track. You can build little buildings in the village here for other bonuses. You're building up your own little engine by increasing your ability to do the actions to a better degree, and even building a fortification around your little player board to get victory points. And there's just, again, so many different combos here. Probably one of the best examples of the personal player boards that you have, which tracks all your resources. It tracks your income when you take certain actions, but you can upgrade that and things. This is just such a Eurocentric game, and I think probably one of the best Euro games of the last couple of years. And recently, my tastes in gaming have leaned slightly towards the lighter side, at least lighter than Prager is. So when I got Prager back to the table, considering this was probably, I think, maybe a top 5, at least a top 10 game for me last year, I was thinking, is it going to fall slightly for me? But by the end of the game, I was just absolutely loving it, and just reminded why this game is so good. So I can definitely see this one holding its own this year, and probably remaining in my top 10. At least it's going to take something special to kick it out of that top 10. So lovely game, and a great experience. So a couple more games that I don't have in my personal collection that we played. We played a 3-player game of 5 Tribes. So 5 Tribes is a weird game for me, because while it's a game that I appreciate the design of, I think it's a very clever design. I like the way that it points is money, and then you use money to basically pay for turn order. I think that's a cool mechanism. I do struggle to find the fun in it. And I think that is because you're so overwhelmed with decisions and the consequences to those decisions that I don't quite have the patience, at least I'm not a patient enough person, to mull over my decisions and think of the consequences to my actions. I just kind of pick something and go with it. And normally that ends up costing me, I don't do too badly at this game. I hold my own, but I'm not good at this game, I will say that. And also, I'm not really prepared to learn all the different genies and things. I just kind of just go with the flow and see what happens. So I think maybe I'm holding myself back on this one, but maybe a little bit too abstract for me, but I can certainly see why people like this one. And we also played a game, another 3-player game actually, of Ganz Schön Clever, or That's Pretty Clever, which is the first Wolfgang Warsch game of that series. And I used to play this game all the time on the mobile app. I thought it's a great app, one of the most addictive apps out there, or just most addictive board games, full stop. Still a fantastic roll and write game, up there with the best of them. But my skills have massively declined in this game. Now, there was a point where I was pretty good at this game. Not great, but I could certainly get a healthy score. But it was right back to the beginnings, the humble beginnings. After this game, very, very much struggled to get a decent score. But I still enjoyed it, and it's a clever game. So that's it, really. That's all the games I played during the second half of May 2022. So be sure to hit like and leave a comment and let me know what you've been playing. If you've been visiting some old classics and some old favourites, I'll be interested to hear that. So there we go. I'll see you next time on Chairman of the Board. Bye bye.